everyone, and welcome to a very Cavendish Christmas. We're going to give it just 1 minute just to make sure that everyone's had a chance to join, and then we will get started. Thank you very much. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining today. Welcome to our very Cavendish Christmas talk. Just to get started, just for anyone who hasn't visited us before or doesn't know exactly where we're based, we're based on the Welbeck Estate in Nottinghamshire. Welbeck Abbey is the ancestral home to the Dukes of Portland and their ancestors since 1607. And the estate is home to 2 galleries, the Portland Collection Museum, which shows a collection of fine and decorative art, and also the Harley Gallery, which shows contemporary exhibitions. My name is Fiona Clapperton, and I am the Education and Engagement Manager for the Harley Foundation. But I'm also a historian with a PhD on the social relations within country estate communities, particularly in the early 20th century. And Christmas has always been a time when people living and working on country estates such as Welbeck have had a chance to celebrate and get together. And so this talk is going to chart the history of Christmas traditions on Welbeck, on the estate of Welbeck, but also Christmas traditions more generally, from the Stuart period up to around about the 1930s. And we're going to be focusing on festive traditions from both upstairs and downstairs, and be thinking about how some of our own Christmas foods and traditions might have been inspired by Christmases past. So, without further ado, let's get started. So the first period we're going to look at is the Stuart period. So we're travelling back now to the early 17th century. And Christmas in Stuart times was an extravagant affair. So celebrations lasted a full 12 days and were enjoyed by rich and poor alike. At the royal court, celebrations lasted even longer. They officially began on the 1st of November, so anyone who might be tempted to put their Christmas tree up early, I'm sure that you're just doing it in fine Stuart tradition. And celebrations didn't end until about the 2nd of February. And there were 3 main festivals. On Christmas Day, the birth of Jesus was celebrated. On New Year's Day, the New Year was celebrated, and focus was on new beginnings. And unlike today, New Year's Day was traditionally the day for exchanging and receiving gifts in the Stuart period. And then finally, on the evening and night of the 6th of January, everyone celebrated what was known as Twelfth Night. And this was the date when the wise men were supposed to have visited Jesus. And it's referenced in the famous Shakespeare play, and also in the famous Christmas carol, The 12 Days of Christmas. Now, Stuarts sang Christmas carols just as we do today. And in fact, some of our favourite Christmas carols were sung during Stuart times. And this includes the 12 Days of Christmas, as well as the First Noel, I Saw 3 Ships, God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen, and While Shepherds Watched. So we're going to have some interactive elements to our talk today. For those of us who are watching this talk back, please feel free to leave a comment under the video, as the sort of the live interactive aspect won't be available to you. I feel a little bit like I'm speaking on I'm a Celebrity or something with that disclaimer. So without further ado, let me swap screens so that you can have a go at voting and sharing. And we're going to ask you what your favourite Christmas carol or song is. The joining information is on your screens now. There's a code that you can pop in, and there's also a QR code to scan. And as I mentioned, for those who are joining us later and watching this talk back, you are able to comment underneath the video instead. So I'm just going to share our screen, and we're going to see in real time how people have responded to that question. So, what is your favourite Christmas carol or song? Oh, we've got some really interesting answers already. So we've got Good King Wenceslas, we've got Jingle Bells, and Oh Little Town of Bethlehem. Those are all lovely, lovely answers. Do feel free to share if you'd like to, or you can always comment in the chat feature or at the bottom of our video. We'll just give it another minute just in case anyone's wanting to type in an answer and share with us. Okay, brilliant. So I'm going to switch back now to our PowerPoint presentation. And just to continue with talking about Twelfth Night, Twelfth Night was seen as officially the end of Christmas, unless you were in the royal court and were celebrating until February. And it was seen out in the most outrageous manner. So there were games, there was feasting, there was merrymaking. And the Lord of Misrule was the name given to the person who oversaw the entire holiday in big households like Welbeck and at the royal court. And he was the master of ceremonies, and he made sure that everyone had lots of fun. So more specifically now at Welbeck during this period, Christmas celebrations were held in the Great Hall of the Abbey. A carved wooden screen shielded the Great Hall from the service area, and this part of the Abbey was known as Screen's Passage. Drinks and dishes of food would make their journeys through this passage on their way from kitchens to the Great Hall. And the kind of foods and drinks served at this time were perhaps a little different from our modern Christmas dinners, but there were some similarities. So the Stuarts really enjoyed a tipple, especially at Christmas time. And every year there are around 40 brewings at Welbeck. And the estate produced different grades of beer. And this ranged from the strong beer that would have been drunk by William Cavendish, who was the first Duke of Newcastle, who made Welbeck his home during the Stuart period. And it would have ranged from this strong beer to small beer, which would have been drunk by children and also lower servants. The most alcoholic of all the brewings was the October Ale, which was brewed with the new season's malt. And this was saved for special celebrations like Christmas. The roast meat that was served at Christmas was usually an extravagant bird. However, unlike today, swan was a popular option. So William Cavendish, the first Duke of Newcastle, who owned Welbeck at this time, was doubtful as to whether the swan or the turkey took pride of place amongst the roast fowl. And he wrote the following poem, joking that the swan, she did boast, the best of the roast. Nay, soft, said the turkey, 'tis I. So plump and so fat, what say you to that? When in sauce of onions I lie. So I'm sure that nowadays we would possibly choose cranberry sauce rather than sauce of onions, but it sounds pretty delicious from that poem. And we're going to get to our next interactive element now. I'm going to ask people to share what they enjoy eating for their Christmas dinner. So just like previously, you can scan the QR code or enter the code, which is on your screens now, or type your answer in the chat box. And for those of us who are watching this back, feel free again to chat and comment underneath the video. So hopefully everyone's had a chance to kind of scan that QR code now. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to switch screens again so we can see how people might have voted. if I can find my button to do so. Here we go. The anticipation. Oh, interesting. So lots of turkey there. Turkey and nut roast, turkey and chicken. Ooh, Brussels sprouts. I enjoy Brussels sprouts, but I know they're a bit Marmite, so not everyone will agree with me here. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoy Brussels sprouts. Pigs in blankets, delicious. Yeah, absolutely, I agree with that. Brilliant. Thanks for sharing, guys. As I mentioned, please do feel free to comment or chat underneath the video, because we are interested to see yeah, what everyone enjoys. So even if you're watching this back and it's not live, we'd be interested to know what you have for your Christmas dinner. And interesting to see that we've got nut roast on there as well. So something for the vegetarians or the vegans out there. Right, so to return to our talk. So whichever was your favourite of the roast meats, we know that in the Stuart period, roast meat would have been sent out first. And this is according to the writer Gervase Markham. So Gervase Markham wrote down recommendations for a banquet. And so we know what order you should be sending your food out in. So according to Gervase Markham, you shall first send forth a dish for show only. Now, he mentions a beast or a bird, fish or fowl, and then he recommends that you send out your marchpane or marzipan, your preserved fruit, then a paste, then a wet sucket or sweetmeat, then a dry sucket or sweetmeat, marmalade, comfits, apples, pears, wardens, oranges, and lemon slice. No two dishes of one kind going or standing together. And he recommends that this will not only appear delicate to the eye, but invite the appetite with the much variety thereof. So for anyone that might be planning a Stuart-themed Christmas dinner this year, those are your instructions to follow. Now, no matter what was served at a banquet, William Cavendish, first Duke of Newcastle, insisted upon a neat and well-dressed dinner table. And we have another poem from him now on the screen. And in this poem, he praises his pantler, or a servant who worked in the dining hall. He praises pantler's ability to set a table fit for a duke. He wrote, "The pantler is neat to set his fine pleat, in napkins that is knit so finely. His spoons, knife and fork, wine bottles with a cork, cooled in snow that drinks so divinely." Now, the screen's passage didn't just form the service area for food that was taken backwards and forwards from the kitchen. It also formed the backstage area for dramatic performances taking place in the Great Hall during festive season. And at this time, members of the aristocracy really enjoyed masques. They were the most popular performances. Masques were a sort of musical theatre. The whole household would get involved and would play different characters. And they wore masks to disguise their true identities. Unfortunately, all of these traditions were thrown into disarray during the years following the Civil War. During Cromwell's reign as Lord Protector of the Commonwealth of England, Scotland and Ireland, stricter laws were passed to catch anybody holding or attending special Christmas church services. And from 1656, legislation was enacted to ensure that every Sunday was stringently observed as Holy Day or Lord's Day. And by contrast, shops and markets were told to stay open on the 25th of December. Oh, we've accidentally gone forwards there. So in the City of London, soldiers patrolled the streets, seizing any food that they discovered being prepared for Christmas celebrations. It's important to consider these measures within the context of the Puritan movement that began in the 16th century. So as we've seen during the Stuart period, just like now, Christmas was a time of long cherished rituals, but also excessive behaviour. And from the mid-1500s, Puritans were objecting to the frivolities of Christmas. They saw Christmas as a time that was quite wasteful and threatened Christian beliefs and encouraged immoral activities. And the discontent that was felt within the Puritan community towards festivals led to forceful legislation even before Cromwell's protectorate. So in January 1645, Parliament produced a new directory for public worship that made clear that festival days, including Christmas, were not to be celebrated, but were to be spent in respectful contemplation. So I think that would possibly make for a much duller Christmas, but I mean, perhaps it could be seen as a sort of early form of mindfulness. Now, during the Civil War, William Cavendish, the first Duke of Newcastle, had to flee the country after losing a battle. And whilst he was in exile, his daughters remained at Welbeck, and he managed to send presents to his daughters from Antwerp, where he was living in exile. So whilst no Christmas festivities were held, there were presents. And these presents included a curious fan, a sweet-toothed comb to comb away bad thoughts, bracelets, silks, masks, and china cloths. Perhaps the masks were used for some secretive and conspicuous mask-like performances during the festive season. Once Cromwell passed away and Charles II was restored to the throne, William Cavendish was able to return from exile, and Christmas festivities returned to Welbeck. But they were different from those that took place before the Civil War. And one of the biggest changes was that masks themselves had fallen out of popularity and were no longer performed in the Great Hall. And instead, we had traditional musical performances taking place in the Great Hall instead. So we're going to whiz forward now to the Victorian period, but I am going to quickly mention a Georgian Christmas tradition. So many of us know that decorating trees at Christmas time was a festive activity popularised by Prince Albert, and that it was inspired by his German heritage. Trees in the royal household were adorned with lit candles and trinkets, and the interiors of the palaces were filled up with evergreen decorations. However, Victoria and Albert weren't actually the first royals to put up what we know of today as Christmas trees. George III married Queen Charlotte, who, like Prince Albert, was raised in Germany. And it was actually Queen Charlotte who's credited with bringing the first decorated evergreen trees to England when she introduced them at Queen's Lodge, Windsor in 1800. But Victoria and Albert are so closely linked with the tradition because they were famously illustrated standing beside a decorated tree with their children. And this illustration was published in the press in the 1840s, and it quickly took hold of the national imagination. And that's why we connect Christmas trees with the Victorians. So we're now going to move on to our third interactive element. And we'd like to know if your family celebrates any Christmas traditions originating in other countries or cultures. So same method as before, you can scan the QR code or type in the code on the screen. I'm just going to give you a second to be able to do that. You can also type in the chat, or if you're watching this back, you can comment underneath the video. So let me just share screen so we can see what those answers might be. Okay. Ah, very interesting. So we've got Voytzangenbowle up there, which I think is a German tradition. And we also have someone who's an ancient historian who tries to incorporate Saturnalia into their festivities. That's amazing. Right, I'll give it just another minute or so, just in case anyone else wants to share. And please do comment if you're watching this back as well. Okay, right, I'm going to return to the slideshow, but please do feel free to comment in the chat if you would like to, if you haven't had a chance to share. Right, so we're now going to focus on the Victorian period. And while for the earlier time period, much of our information on Welbeck's Christmas celebrations focuses on the family living in the Abbey, for the Victorian period, we have much more evidence about how the staff at Welbeck would have spent their Christmas. For example, we know that during the time of William Cavendish-Bentinck, the fourth Duke of Portland and descendant of the first Duke of Newcastle, on Christmas Day in 1850, breakfast in the hall was offered to 20 outdoor employees from the stables, 15 from the farm, 10 from the plantation, and 2 visitor servants. We also know that it had become common for noble individuals like the Dukes of Portland to extend their charity to the poor during the Christmas period. The tradition of bestowing gifts of meat and coal and clothing to tenants of country estates took hold during the 19th century. Country newspapers were filled with notices of these charitable bequests. Typical of one of these is one from the Western Gazette dated the 20th of January 1871, which states, "A quantity of pheasants was sent into Sherborne by Mr. Earl Drax and distributed amongst his numerous friends and tenants connected with Holness, Longburton and Folk Estates." Others went to greater efforts to please their tenants. A notice from 1892, for instance, reports that Lord Wolverton of Ewen Minster had a fat bullock killed this week and distributed to the workmen and tenants on his estate. Gifts such as these were a welcome treat for many working class families, as many could not afford to buy expensive meat at Christmas time. The presents were often distributed by the estate steward or land agent, but occasionally the mistress or the master of the household might take it upon themselves personally to visit each of the tenants and their families. We know from historical records that during the fourth Duke's time, meat, bread and beer were given away at Welbeck, and they were always given away at Christmas time and often also during hard winters. When the son of the fourth Duke inherited the title and the estate, William John Cavendish-Bentinck, the fifth Duke of Portland, not only gave gifts to his tenants and staff, but he would come out to see them and spend time with them during the festive season. Elizabeth Butler, laundry maid to the fifth Duke, recalls, "Some of the women used to work with small children with them, especially in holiday times." Now, one thing is certain, the Duke was fond of children, who were never frightened or nervous of him. I have heard from some of them, grown older, of their days in the woods, especially at chestnut times, when he used to set them gathering chestnuts. He would help them too, till one small girl said, "I don't like gathering downhill, mister." "Very well, we will turn and go up," said the Duke. Meeting the same child one evening, he said, "Where are all your chestnuts?" "Oh, mister, we've left them all in the wood," was her answer. Now, at this time, New Year's Day was still a more important date for celebrations than Christmas itself. Elizabeth Butler recalls that the annual dinner for the servants was held on New Year's Day, not on Christmas Day. Unfortunately, one year it was cancelled at short notice because the fifth Duke's brother had died only 2 days before. Butler wrote that the man who brought us the news did so in this way: "There's not going to be any New Year's because Lord Henry is dead. Well, of course there will be New Year's, but no dinner." It shows how little things of that sort were made public talk of in those days, writes Elizabeth Butler, because Lord Henry died late on a Saturday night, and the news was brought to the Duke either on that night or on Sunday, and we were told on early Monday morning. I do remember being told that on the Duke receiving the message, he sat for an hour without speaking or moving, and then told his valet that the heir to Welbeck was dead. By the late Victorian, early Edwardian period, celebrations for domestic servants at houses like Welbeck had grown much, much larger. Christmas was a busy time of year. It was also one of the few occasions when staff members' hard work and loyal service might be acknowledged and rewarded. Many landowners, especially those with 20 or more servants, held some sort of celebration for their household staff, and a local band was often drafted in for musical entertainment. At events such as this, it was the custom for the master of the house to begin the festivities by dancing with the cook or housekeeper, whilst his wife would partner the house steward or butler. After William Cavendish-Bentinck became the 6th Duke of Portland in 1879, he and his wife, Duchess Winifred, usually spent Christmas at Welbeck. One of the events of the season was the Christmas household ball, which was timed to coincide with the Duke's birthday on December the 28th. It was held in a vast underground picture gallery, and one observer, Charles Archard, described the subjects of the old painters looking down from their canvases upon the gay dancers. Archard noted, choice exotics, stately palms and seasonable shrubs added to the variety of the decorations. The band is almost entirely hidden in a bower of foliage in the centre of the great saloon, and there are 500 guests of all ranks of society, from peers and peeresses to the humblest domestic servant. About 10 o'clock, the Duke and Duchess appear with their household party, and dancing commences. The Duke is the housekeeper, the partner, and the Duchess the house steward, while the aristocratic guests find partners amongst other chiefs of departments in the Welbeck household. With midnight comes supper, served in 2 adjacent underground rooms that owe their excavation to the hobby of the old Duke. All the festive parties sit down to supper at the same time, the Duke's French chef providing the menu. The house steward presides and proposes the health of the ducal family, and this is welcomed in the manner it deserves, and then dancing is resumed in the picture gallery. During the early years of the 20th century, Boxing Day at country houses would often be devoted to outdoor sports such as hunting or shooting. The 6th Duke of Portland recalled one such shoot in his memoirs when the Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand was visiting Welbeck with his wife. The Duke wrote that in December 1913, on his first day out, the Archduke Franz Ferdinand found some of the high-flying pheasants rather more than he could manage, but on the 2 following days he proved himself to be quite first class, and certainly the equal of most of my friends. I am convinced that, given enough practice in this country, he would have been equal to any of our best shots. I was told that he was considered the best rifle shot in Austria-Hungary, and I can well believe it. We found His Imperial Highness and his charming wife the most delightful of guests. However, the 6th Duke did draw attention to one particular incident from this time. When the Archduke was my guest, he had a narrow escape from being killed. There was rather deep snow on the ground, and after a rise of pheasants, one of the loaders fell down. This caused both barrels of the gun he was carrying to be discharged, the shot passing within a few feet of the Archduke and myself. I have often wondered whether the Great War might not have been averted, or at least postponed, had the Archduke met his death then, and not at Sarajevo the following year. The 6th Duke also recalled another occasion when he hosted the future 10th Duke of Devonshire, then known as Lord Hartington. He reminisced that Hartington was a keen, though not very accurate shot. When shooting at Creswell Crags, in the company of Henry Chaplin and 1 or 2 of his other friends, he killed an exceptionally high-flying partridge in a manner equal to some of the best shots. His friends, thereupon, gave a loud cheer. When the drive was over, he said to me, "I wonder why Henry Chaplin and the others cheered when I fired both barrels at a cock pheasant and missed." "Missed a cock pheasant with both barrels?" I said. "Why, you killed the highest partridge that ever flew from Nottinghamshire into Derbyshire." "Did I?" said Hartington. "I didn't even know it was there. However, it's over now, so don't say anything about it. Let me keep my reputation." The 6th Duke noted that we still call that place Hartington's Stand. After the First World War, it was accepted that many of the large-scale shoots of the previous era were at an end. Part of the revulsion against the mass slaughter of game after 1918 arose not merely on the grounds of cost and organisation, but as a result of the human large-scale slaughter which had taken place during the First World War. In 1937, the Duke of Portland spoke for a number of other landowners when he admitted that he was quite ashamed of the enormous number of pheasants we sometimes killed on his Welbeck Estate. Although that was not a view shared by King George V, who prided himself on his shooting prowess and continued to revel in achieving large bags both at Sandringham and elsewhere. So the final tradition from this time, which we have lots of information on, is presents. From the Victorian period onwards, presents were often opened on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day itself. We don't know exactly what presents were opened at Welbeck, but we do know that on one evening each Christmas, all of the children on the Welbeck Estate, whether from staff or whether from the household itself, were invited to a party. Charles Archard described one of these events from the early 1900s. The head of a giant Christmas tree is reared in the centre of the ballroom, laden with toys for distribution to them, and the pleasures of the entertainment are varied with the tricks of a conjurer and ventriloquist. Thus is afforded a glimpse of happy relations. Presents were also given to servants, and we know that at Queen Victoria's royal homes, Christmas was an opportunity for her to show gratitude to her staff. Victoria was very involved with her servants, and she took a maternal interest in their well-being. At Osborne House, for example, there were well over 100 servants, and on Christmas Eve, the royal family would join them in the servants' hall to share gifts. Gifts could include books, clothing, or food. The Queen would also give gifts to her close personal servants, like her dresses and pages. And this act of gratitude was so important to the Queen that she did it before she and her family opened their own presents. However, some noble families didn't put quite as much thought into the presents given to their servants and tenants. Viola Geraldine Banks of Kingston Lacey recalled how the servants did not have a party, though they did have a Christmas dinner with beef instead of turkey. At 9 o'clock, they lined up along one side of the dining room in hierarchical order to receive their excruciatingly dull presents. A length of cloth for each woman, either black for Sunday or cheerful flowered cotton for every day, to be made up at their own expense. And a box of chocolates. The men were each given 10 shillings and a box or a bottle of port. The custom of presenting maids with a bolt of cloth to be tailored into a new uniform continued in many country houses up until the Second World War. And we're coming to our final interactive element now. So we would like you to share either your best or the most disappointing Christmas present you've received. So exactly the same method as before, QR code on the screen or a code to type in, or you can share it in the chat feature. And if you're watching this video back, you can comment underneath the video. So I'm just now going to share the next screen so we can see how people, how the presents that people have shared and that they've received. Let's have a look. Oh, socks. I can't tell whether socks is a best present or a most disappointed present. I, as an adult, really enjoy getting socks. Toys that don't work or have no batteries, yeah, that is really, really upsetting. A torch, again, useful, but yeah, I'm not sure it's a very exciting present. I remember as a small child, maybe 6 or 7, my parents hid all the gifts except for one small old-fashioned teddy bear and said that's all Santa had left. I cried for hours even after they told me it was a joke. Oh no, that is really sad. Oh, I'll wait another minute just in case anyone's got anything else they would like to share. And yeah, please do comment underneath this video as well if you're watching this back. Okay. Right. Okay. So, while many traditions have changed over the years, during the Victorian era, the festive season still traditionally ended with the celebration of Twelfth Night. Most country houses held their largest and most elaborate party at this time. Events started with the sharing of the Twelfth Night cake, which was baked to contain a dried pea and a dried bean, and those who received the slices containing the bean and pea were designated the king and queen of the night's festivities. And this might mean that the master and mistress of the house had to obey their servants. But, as one servant noted rather soberly, it was work again the next morning and a case of wash and change into uniform for a day's duty. and so life would continue until the next Christmas. So thank you very much for joining us today. Merry Christmas to everyone. I hope you found this interesting. If you are interested in getting festive over the next few weeks, we've got some interesting events taking place at the Harley Gallery. We've got on Sunday the 4th of December, customised Christmas jumpers. It's £7 per child and parents go free. On Sunday the 11th of December in the morning, we've got children's Christmas decorations, and they include the little decoration that you should be able to see on your screen there right now. And on Sunday the 18th of December, we have a drop-in. It's the first time we're trying a drop-in, and we're creating alternative Christmas wreaths, like the one picture on the screen, and that's £7 per wreath. And you can find all the information about these events and book at the Harley Gallery website. So thanks very much for joining me today, everyone. It's been a real pleasure, and yeah, looking forward to hearing some more comments on this video about some of those Christmas traditions that you celebrate at home. Thank you, everyone, and Merry Christmas.